drama being a embedded technique or approach within the primary classroom, and to share the evidence-based rationale, so not just taking my word for it, looking at educational practitioners and seeing what they have said on the topic. So evidence-based on this particular slide in terms of reading in drama. And really lots of educational theorists and educational publishers do really advocate for this idea that if we embed drama within our teaching, it is proven that that does develop the students' understanding of reading and literary elements, and promotes development in these particular areas. And I think what is most important for me is developing and promoting the idea of a love of reading, because we don't just want students to read because they have to. We want them to read because they want to. And I think this is a real initiative in terms of the DFE and primary education to really instill that idea that students are enthusiastic about reading all different types of texts. Lots of people advocate for the approach, so using a repertoire of simple drama techniques in the classroom, it can be highly effective in developing children's literacy, oral rehearsal of sentence structures, oral rehearsal of key vocabulary, picking up that key vocabulary and putting it into a real life or constructed scenario helps fluency and comprehension. So you're giving those elements of vocabulary a real sense of context when you explore them through a dramatic lens. Drama is a statutory golden thread running through the English curriculum, right from the early years framework when we talk about communication and interaction, right up until the provision of GCSE and A-level drama. So the idea is that if it's embedded early, then it becomes part of their curriculum, even whether it's the taught curriculum or the hidden curriculum, in terms of building those social interactions and those opportunities to speak and explore creatively throughout a young person's educational landscape. And the EYSF also advocate for the use of drama within their framework in terms of storytelling, narratives, and like one of you said about your implementation of role-playing. So bringing something to life contextually using speech and movement really helps embed that particular knowledge. And some limitations that were discussed over here as well, in terms of drama sometimes being seen as a daunting element of teaching to bring in, possibly for behaviour management concerns, but also maybe a lack of specialism or a lack of confidence delivering it. But really, with high quality modelling and preparation and observation of good practice, just like any other teaching technique, it can be really effective within the classroom. So drama, how does it support reading? We want to make sure that we are building on existing knowledge and existing schema, and when we embed drama in existing schema, it just consolidates and solidifies the concept. So if we're teaching students a new concept and we want them to get their heads around the understanding of that concept, putting it into a drama framework really helps make links between their understanding and their schema. It encourages students to put their learning into the context of the real world, making it relevant, making it appropriate. We can also build lots of practical approaches into reading. So we can have peer reading, we can have echo reading, we can have the theatres read, and lots of different reading techniques that we can embed in a practical whole class approach really helps develop that literacy and those oral opportunities. We want our students to be enthusiastic and curious if we give them a text, a poem, a story. We want them to want to find out what happens at the end. We want them to really connect with the character. We want them to think about what an alternative ending might be or what that character might do in this scenario. and certain dramatic techniques will lend itself really easily to sparking that curiosity, and also help them explore certain vocabulary in a different learning environment. There's been lots of studies recently about picking up learning and putting it into a different environment, whether it be a forest school, whether it be a practical hall, whether it's a traditional classroom, and what the difference is in terms of knowledge retention, engagement in the content, etc. So picking that learning up and putting it into a more practical learning environment seems to be quite beneficial in terms of those elements of learning. It can strengthen reading. So through dramatic techniques, it can deepen things like comprehension of narrative and characters. It can develop the idea of fluency and use of expression. We have that example over there as well. And like you say, drama can be implemented quite subtly within teaching. So a student that you might have that is quite reluctant to speak or answer questions or read, if we implement these drama techniques subtly and they're low stakes, they're more likely to build in their particular confidence, especially around fluency of reading and reading aloud. It does provide just the essence of drama when you think about script work and character profiles. It does lend itself to an additional reading opportunity in addition to stories and poetry. And it can help the pupils develop their emotional literacy, which was highlighted earlier. Having to think about stepping into the shoes of characters and thinking about how they would navigate certain situations, the do's and the don'ts, what are the consequences of different things, particularly like PSHE, thinking about real life scenarios. There's lots of opportunities for reading specifically in drama, not just script. Of course, we have our traditional dramatic texts, such as plays or scenes or even monologue extracts, where the students can read for meaning, clarity, character, and also for certain age groups, a discussion of subtext is quite helpful to embed within your teaching. We've also got the more functional reading opportunities, such as stage directions. So not necessarily reading for character or narrative, but reading for function. And you know, if you've got a student who's much more functional in terms of their learning and enjoys the more sort of scientific content and elements, teaching stage directions through technical theatre and technical notes could be another opportunity. Reading for character understanding, so character profiles or maybe role on the walls or character mind maps to gain that understanding. We've got also reading around the play, so giving students maybe a bit of text about the time period or the context of the play, or maybe a newspaper clipping of the particular social issue that the play explores, to really embed that learning and to just give them a further range of opportunities to draw their information from. And then we've also got reading source text. So if the playwright has used a poem to inspire a particular play or scene, giving the students an opportunity to read the before and to see how it transpired after. So what was the stimulus, what was the poem, and how that poem has now fed into the creation of a particular text or story. And I realise this is text heavy, but it's just to really highlight the cross-curricular opportunities of vocabulary teaching when we are talking about drama. So just like any subject in the curriculum, drama comes with its own really rich and sometimes unique list of vocabulary, so a vocabulary bank. And some of these words will be brand new to the students and would mean that they are acquiring quite subject-specific language. But others, you can see, have a really strong cross-curricular link between certain other subjects in their primary curriculum. So for example, we've got the idea of a narrator or improvisation. You will talk about improvisation in subjects like music, you might refer to the narrator in subjects like English. So if you just take a glance, there's lots of different cross-curricular vocabulary building opportunities that you can build into your curriculums, your planning, and also your teacher instruction and your oracy as a practitioner as well, to make sure that those words are delivered consistently with the meanings that are cross-curricular. So we've got lots of opportunities to embed drama into our teaching, but it is worth talking about who is it actually going to benefit. So what cohorts of students? So those of you in the room that are new to teaching, and those of you in the room that have got that wide range of experience, you know that you'll have students who are, have a particular special educational need. They might have different confidence levels in terms of reading, and they might have English as an additional language. And really, drama is a really good way to bridge those potential learning and language gaps between cohorts of students. Because essentially drama works to turn language into something quite tangible and something quite physical. It works to make language something that students can either see, feel, or do. And we know by all of our teacher training lectures that students are more likely to understand and retain information if they are physically going through that particular motion or skill, because they are embodying it. And drama gives the students an opportunity to embody their learning. And this can be done through lots of different ways. One way that's really popular is multi-sensory, and sometimes students with particular learning needs learn really effectively through multi-sensory application. So whether that is acting out stories, whether that's using a sensory box, a role play, whether that's using sensory cues, so visual, oral, to stimulate learning or to link, whether that's dual coding opportunities. So if you're thinking about your classrooms now and you're thinking about a particular poem or text that you're teaching the students, if you could use a sensory experience to, when they enter the classroom, explore, that experience is more likely to stick in their memories, but also resonate in terms of what they're seeing, what they're hearing, and what they're feeling. Students who might have a language barrier really benefit from rehearsing and observing rehearsal, because the more opportunities you give students with EAL, for example, opportunities to hear language, the more impactful it's going to be. Yes, there's obviously time and space for independent learning in silence, but it's the lessons where they have a safe space to practice language that is going to be really impactful for those students who have a language barrier. So taking it in turns to read lines so that they can hear a line being said, they can then say it themselves. Opportunities to observe people interacting in rehearsal and how people communicate with each other, how they listen, how they negotiate, how they share their ideas. For students who have a particular language barrier, that is lots of opportunities for them to access the spoken word and build their confidence in terms of their use and decoding of language. And not only do we want the students to embody our teaching and understand language, we also want them to understand what they're reading. We want them to comprehend the narrative, the characters, the concept, the context, and the meaning. So when students enact a scene or a particular word, or they bring a character to life, they are physically understanding and working through that understanding of that particular element. And I think the idea of inference is really important during sort of the implementation of drama, because we are always asking the why and the how questions. So why did this character do that? How would you feel in that scenario? How would you go about creating that scene with your bodies? Okay, why would you react like that if somebody said that to you? So we are not only giving the students a memorable experience, creating a comfortable, low-stakes environment for language rehearsal, we are also creating an opportunity for critical thinking and comprehension. As I said before, we encourage contextual language learning, so making sure that students can physically see what certain actions look like. So yes, we might read a paragraph and it has lots of maybe verbs within the paragraph or adjectives. If the students can physically see those verbs and adjectives come to life on somebody else's body or through somebody else's reading, their understanding of them is going to be much more developed and impactful. Reduce cognitive overload, so it's just a different way of delivering. So rather than a lot of teacher talk, rather than a lot of peer talking and marking, we're just giving the students another element of their learning to focus on to break up their cognitive load. Okay, and it's another scaffold that you can implement. Okay, we're going to read something, we're going to discuss it, you're going to do a little bit of role play on it, and then we're going to sit back down and everything that you've just learned through your practical exploration, you're going to put down in a diary entry or a character profile. So using drama techniques as that additional scaffold to cement learning within your lesson structure is a really good approach. There's a couple of videos embedded within this PowerPoint, which I'm sure you'll receive a copy of. Embedding script reading within your teaching is probably your, a go-to in terms of teaching drama within the classroom. And embedding script reading is a really good opportunity to promote literacy as it covers 3 distinct modes of reading. When we're reading a script and we're teaching students how to, unpick a script and read a script successfully, you've got the creative mode, the functional mode, and also the characteristic mode. So if you think about your traditional script, there are 3 different elements of reading opportunities within that script. You've got the creative, so you've got the scene description, the character description, setting the context. You've got the characters, so the character lines, the stage directions that show how they're feeling, what they're thinking, empathy, perspective. But you've also got the functionality of a script. When are the lights going to come up? When are they going to fade down? Is the character going to exit stage right or stage left? Is there going to be a blackout? Is there going to be any sound effects? And what do those sound effects mean? So this also, if you've got learners that really excel in either creative writing or the more functional subjects, this can work to encompass all of your learners. So you would show them a traditional script, and this is just an idea as to how you might break down those 3 modes of reading. You've got the technical line at the top of the script that introduces them to new functional vocabulary. You've got the scene description that happens right at the beginning of the scene, which is creative writing at its best. It's the who, the what, the when, and the where. So you can use character reading or functional reading as a way to structure your practical reading activities so that you are sure that all of your learners are able to access this particular language in some way. And then another element of teaching drama and allowing drama to really promote that literacy is through storytelling. And storytelling is a really underrated approach, and you can underpin it in lots of different ways and implement it in lots of different ways. Because we don't want children just to be hearing stories, we want them to be becoming those stories. So we want them to access them in different ways. You can engage in story mapping, where the students create a storyboard that reveals their understanding of what happens in a particular sequence. They can then get up and bring this storyboard to life physically as an additional scaffold. They can go through an improvised ending, where you create sort of lots of what-if scenarios, and the students have an opportunity to critically think about an alternative ending and bring that to life. And that links really well with creative writing outcomes, where they have to think about different sort of scenarios and endings and think outside the box. If you've used puppets before, it's a really brilliant technique within your teaching to bring certain character, sections of character dialogue to life and put it into sort of a practical and visual context for the students, and that is very low stakes as well in terms of embedding it as a drama technique.
Just to add, we used puppets in mathematics,
Oh,
which
okay.
is something that I found was interesting. So we used a bluebird puppet,
Okay.
and it was number bonds to 10. So we had
Okay.
how many you had in your palm, and then the puppet would go in and say, okay, there's 3 in here, how many blocks would be in here?
Yeah.
And the children would absolutely like turn out, be like, okay, let's count together, let bluebird count and tick them out. And initially I thought that was just using manipulatives, but it was actually like role-playing and drama, and the children were absolutely enamoured with the fact that Bluebird was helping them or being part of that. So I think that not only in English and reading, obviously, you know, reading for pleasure is the topic and sort of the basis, but you can have be experimentative with stuff like that in drama. Like I've found it's worked in multiple subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think that's just another example of quite low preparation in terms of your time and your planning, but high rewards. And if it makes students engage in subjects such as the core of maths and reduces possible anxiety around that particular subject area, then it can only be a positive thing. So thank you for that example. I've put a step-by-step guide on how to implement it. But essentially what you would do is extract an extract from maybe a poem or a story or a text that you're teaching your young people, and the advice is that you split that extract into 3 and assign each a colour. You then split your class into 3 and you go through the I do, we do, you do scaffolded modelling approach for your 3 groups. So essentially the teacher would read aloud the yellow highlight, and the yellow group would repeat the read aloud. They would then do the same with the blue highlighted passage, and the blue group would mimic back the expression and the intonation. The green group will also do the same thing. Okay. And so it means that there is repetition, it means that there is language that they are hearing on a regular basis, and it also means that they have an opportunity to embed expression. Apologies about the exit, they've got another session. We're sort of double teaching today. So that is essentially how that works. And it means that you can put expression, such as if you look at the green line just here, you can play about with the expression. So you can mimic to them, "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asks Susan. Or, "What on earth are you talking about?" So you can really play around with your pace, your pitch, your emphasis, and really see what the students pick up in terms of the emotion and the intonation of their spoken word. And also, it's really fun, it's interactive, whole class involvement, and low stakes in terms of confidence needed. Freeze frames, my favourite go-to. You can't go wrong with a freeze frame. It's a drama technique that allows students to explore a particular scene in greater depth. So if they're reading a story, there will be key moments within that story or poem or text that you really want them to remember and be aware of. Now, it might be impactful just to keep repeating them verbally and saying, "Oh, do you remember in that story when so-and-so does this? And do you remember when so-and-so does this?" It might be impactful to get them to draw a picture. But what I found is more impactful is if they take that particular key moment from a text and they bring it to life using a freeze frame. It enhances literal and inferential comprehension, because through the creation of their freeze frame, you can see whether they're actually understanding that particular key moment and what happens within it. So for you, as a teacher, it's a really good informal assessment strategy. If the text is a bit complicated and complex for certain reading levels or language acquisition levels, freeze frames work to simplify the narrative or the vocabulary of a text to grasp that understanding a little bit better. Give students another reference point. It's basically like physical dual coding. Yeah, this is the moment that I really want you to remember that we've just read. You've heard me read it. You've seen the text on the screen. This is another code that I'm going to give you in a practical sense so that you can link up your knowledge. And it's really simple. You read a short, significant extract from the text. You discuss what the important elements of that particular moment are. You demonstrate, if you're confident enough to, how you might work to bring that moment to life using a frozen image. And then you would get your students into small groups and get them to create that image. So for Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, you could say, right, we finished reading Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. These are the important moments in the text that I really want you to focus on. Okay, note how so-and-so is doing this over here. You need to pay attention on the emotions of these characters here. Think about the location of this moment here and how you're going to show that with your bodies. You would then split them into groups, give them a couple of moments to construct a still image which represents the important moment. A next scaffold would be, right, now you've created those still images, can you put them in the correct sequence for me? So within that particular task, what are we developing their knowledge of? Thoughts in the room? So bringing an important moment to life with your bodies and sequencing them effectively. What are we, say again?
Chronology. Chronology,
yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the structure of your particular text or story, making sure that when they're reading it there is comprehension as to sequencing, absolutely. What about the still image itself? What are we promoting in terms of knowledge? As a teacher, when you look at a still image, what are you going to be able to be confident that they know?
Inferring.
Yeah, definitely. Inferring. So when they've read that particular extract, when Edmund's life is in the balance, do they actually understand the emotions that are attached within that? Do they understand which character had which role within that moment? Are they using levels? Are they using body language to show you that they understand this particular key bit of the text? And generally, this is a really good option to do when you have finished the reading of a complete text, to see whether there's any misconceptions and whether you need to reteach any of those narrative elements. In addition to that, you've got the idea of thought tracking or a conscience alley. So again, the idea of the student embodying a character and thinking as though they are that character, putting themselves in the shoes of that character. Helps empathy, helps the student to actively engage with the reading of that text, helps them to understand the motivations of the characters that you are trying to get them to understand. And implementing it is really, really easy. Thought tracking can happen at the end of a freeze frame. So you would ask the students to create a key moment to develop their inference. You would then ask them to structure it in a chronological order to check their sequencing and their understanding of narrative. Then the next scaffold of that was for the student playing Aslan to speak Aslan's thoughts in that particular moment out loud. So at this particular moment in the text, how is this character feeling? And they have to come up with that using their own words. I feel like this. The student playing Edmund, I feel like this. So again, you're testing their comprehension of character with that additional scaffolded task. Hot seating is another way that we can really develop this idea of character. It's about asking characters questions. So you would say, right, you're going to play the character of Aslan, and you are going to sit in front of the class. And the class are going to come up with questions to ask Aslan. So you're going to have a discussion with your students. Right, what do we know about Aslan? And maybe make a mind map on the board or have a nice open discussion. Then your next question is going to be, what don't we know, or what do we want to know about Aslan. Get each student to write a question. Then the hot seating activity is the student is going to be in the role of Aslan. They are getting asked questions from the class, and their task is to answer those questions in the role of Aslan. So thinking about that character, how would Aslan respond to that question? What do they already know about Aslan that is going to inform their answer? And as a teacher, that is a beautiful task, because you can sit and observe and assess how much does this student here know about their character, and do they know their character in depth enough, and how much do these students know about this particular character from the questions that they're asking. So really nice, again, no preparation needed for a little hot seating activity. That hot seating activity, when you've gathered all of Aslan's perspectives, can feed into a writing task or an additional role play task. Write a diary entry, create a storyboard of Aslan's life, create a timeline, put Aslan into a role play, yeah, with all of that information. Deepening your understanding of characters works really well. And sensory stories, I had a little talk about those earlier on, but really sensory stories are probably, I would say, the only dramatic technique that takes a little bit of time to create. And sensory stories is really using props, using set design, using music, using visual stimulation to create an environment for your students. It improves comprehension and memory, because multisensory experiences really work well to enhance understanding. So it could be that they come in listening to a piece of music which links to the theme of your poem. It could be that you are dressed up in a costume that infers meaning about the particular text. It could be that you've created a nice sort of alternative location over here in your classroom that they all have to gather around and be a part of. So think about sensory opportunities, especially for students with complex needs or sensory impairments. You want to make sure that they are being considered within your planning as well. So, I mean, I could have made this session 2 hours, but really it's just thinking about opportunities. Are you given opportunities for dramatic techniques to be embedded within your teaching of reading and to promote language acquisition and literacy? It provides those really important entry points for learners with additional needs, and learners that perhaps haven't had strong language acquisition prior to your teaching. Gives them that low stakes, more fun, more active entry point to make links between their learning. If your students are struggling with comprehension, so they can do sounds, they can blend, they can read, they can decode to a certain extent, but when they have to complete a comprehension task, they struggle. Drama is really good for that sense of inference. And then the use of vocabulary. We are, as a subject, like I say, embodying new words, improvisation, narration, design, that can be cross-curricular links between their subjects, which improves their attention. And also making their learning experience much more active rather than a passive exposure to their learning and bringing their learning to life. And I believe, yeah, that brings me to the end of my session. Any questions or thoughts? I know that's a lot of information to be thrown at you, but any negative experiences with drama, any additional things that you could add, any questions or thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's also worth being aware of, not all children like or want to engage in drama. Yeah. And I think being able to have other options for them to do that are drama related, that could help. So I recently I love using drama in reading I do all the planning for my reading and writing, and I guess like one of my adaptive teaching strategies was one of the children didn't want to be in any of the groups, was very upset, was close to having a bit of a meltdown.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't you come and work with me and figure out whether or not these children have chosen to present Beowulf as a hero already. Like, you come and help me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think maybe having more strategies in terms of if there are children that do really, really struggle, or like SEND children that can find the noise level quite unsettling, or the fact of just being in front of your classmates and performing difficult, to have sort of those branches that still have to do with drama, but are slightly separated and don't necessarily put the spotlight on.
Absolutely. It's, you know, like with any subject, it doesn't come without its limitations or complications or perceptions of, you know, confidence and comfortableness. But yeah, absolutely, to your point, it's important that you adapt just like you would in any subject that you teach, and having that sort of toolkit of, you can be the director, you can go around and check, you can make sure the students have the correct props, you can come and be my helper, you can sit and write a script for that particular scene rather than bringing that to life. If you can embed those adaptive opportunities, then absolutely. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I think it's how you embed it, how you present it, how you set those expectations, and what alternative provisions you have ready to go that will make the implementation much smoother and much more successful. But yeah, really, really good point, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts before we wrap up?